Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Lean In New York City Network's live interview series, Leaning Into the Future of Work, hosted by your New York City Network leader, Deborah Albert. Today, Deborah will be speaking with the sensational Sandy Carter, American businesswoman, speaker, and author. I'm Michelle Liu, and I'll be moderating today's broadcast for your questions and comments. As usual, let us know where you're tuning in from. What do you think Web3 will look like for you? Would you consider buying an NFT? Let us know by posting it in the comments section. And if you like what you heard, let us know. Tap that button, click that heart emoji, and comment with your reaction. Now, without further ado, here's Deborah.
Hi, Michelle, and hi, everybody. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm super excited about this stuff because, as I'm sure most of you, we're hearing about NFTs all over the place. And there are a lot of people who are coming out of the woodwork in podcasts, in print, not print anymore, really, digital media of other sorts, talking about this stuff. But you know what? As much as I keep hearing about it, and as much as I keep reading about it, I still have a little bit of trouble getting it, really getting it so that I could actually even explain it to someone else. So I thought, let's bring Sandy Carter on and have her explain it to you since she's an expert. Okay, so here's Sandy. Sandy is an senior vice president at a company called Unstoppable Domains. She's responsible for driving new partnerships for Web 3.0, blockchain, and NFTs. Previously, Sandy was at Amazon Web Services, IBM. Basically, she's been in tech for a really long time. Not to say that she's old, but she's got a lot of experience. She's the chairman of the board of Girls in Tech, the author of Extreme Innovation, and the founder of Unstoppable Women Web 3. Okay, so you want more proof that she knows what she's talking about? She's a top 100 most inspirational women of Web 3, a Federal 100 Award winner, member of Fortune's Most Powerful Women, and CNN's Top 10 Most Powerful Women in Technology. Okay, you guys are in for a treat. Let's bring Sandy on. Oh, can't hear you. You're muted.
There we go.
That's kind of funny, right? Here I am talking about how you've been in tech forever, and okay.
Oh, great to see you, Deborah. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it, and I'm sure that the people in the audience do as well. Because since you and I have talked, you obviously impressed me, besides knowing what you're talking about, but actually being able to speak in a way that I and other people who aren't in it can actually understand. So let's start from the very beginning. Please define what a non-fungible token, NFT, is.
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple. A non-fungible token is a digital asset. So if you think about it, a token is just that digital asset that you use and leverage. Non-fungible means that you have ownership rights to it. So when you buy an NFT, you have a way to identify ownership or verification that it's real. Much like you do, like if you bought, a baseball card. My mom collects Ted Williams baseball cards. She gets a stamp of authentication on it. That's the same thing that non-fungible token is. So an NFT could be a domain. It could be a piece of art. It could be music. There's so many things that an NFT could be in the digital space.
Okay, so let's break that down just a little bit. It's an asset. So a baseball card, obviously, if you have a big collection, that's very valuable.
Yep.
A piece of art, obviously an asset, real estate, etc. So all of this stuff can be, tell me if this is a correct sentence, all of these things can be represented, or your ownership of them can be represented in what maybe used to be called a certificate of authenticity. Now it's called a non-fungible token, because of the technology that is better than just a certificate, let's say, or more reliable, more trustworthy. Would that be right?
More trustworthy, and it's digital too. The new generation likes digital assets. So instead of me having a physical card, I have a digital card. Or, even in fashion, right? Instead of having a real pair of earrings, I have a pair of digital earrings. And those digital earrings still have that certificate of authenticity, but it just happens to be on the blockchain.
Okay. So I want to get into blockchain. And if anyone is interested, I did an interview with Dan Spoller of the Blockchain Association in DC. I think it was January, maybe February. So he goes into pretty specific detail about the blockchain. But for everyone's purposes, I still kind of want you to talk about that. But first, I have to ask you. I love these earrings, and I like wearing them. And if I have them as a digital asset, personally, I'm not sure I understand why I would want that, unless these are very expensive, well-known, shishi brand, and I can show people on my phone, for example, that I own them, because it's the same thing as wearing them, right? Is that what it's about?
Well, part of it is, so when you're in the metaverse, you have an avatar. And your avatar is a digital representation of you. And in fact, 40% of people say that avatar really and truly represents who they are, not who you see in real life, which is, we can have a whole discussion about that too. And so for me, for example, I bought a pair of digital earrings because I went to a fashion show in the metaverse. And, I dolled up, I had feathers, I wore a dress that, had I worn it in real life, Deborah, would have been wicked uncomfortable. Because I was wearing it in the metaverse, I could wear it and look, really super cool without being worried about it being uncomfortable. And so what that did was it enabled me, other people who had the same earrings I had, we were kind of in a community together, but it enabled me to dress up. I had something very unique on, including my dress and my earrings and my shoes as well. And so, when you go to a fashion show in New York City, which you guys have great fashion shows, I used to live there, you want to look your best. And when you go to the metaverse and you speak, you want to look your best. So I recently just did a session in the metaverse for college students. I wanted my avatar to have jeans on and look a little bit more college professory. But then I went and I did a session. It was a town hall with a couple other government officials, and I wanted to be a little bit more dressed up. So I had to change my avatar. So just like you do that in real life, you do that in the metaverse as well.
Okay. So there's, you mentioned blockchain, and you mentioned metaverse, and there's a lot of stuff in between. Let's just kind of define very quickly, as you would define blockchain, and if I hope I'm saying it correctly, how it is the backbone of everything NFT, Web3, metaverse, crypto, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So everything is built on the chain. We call it on the chain, which is the blockchain. And if you had Dan's like the best on the blockchain. The way I like to describe it is the blockchain is a digital ledger. And why that's interesting is if you think about an old-fashioned ledger, you write on that, I got $100, I gave $20 to this store, I gave $50 here, I got another $20. And so what happens is you're logging the pluses and the minuses so that people can go back and say, oh, how did I get from $100 to $10? You can see all of that. And that's what the blockchain does. It gives you that transparency. It's not like a Google Doc where 3 people can go in and you lost what you had before. Everything is there for everybody to see. It's also very trusted, and it enables decentralization because these blocks of information live in different areas, which means that no one company, no one government has access to that information. It's verified by a set of sources. So it ensures that you don't have one person controlling the contract, one person controlling the business model, et cetera. So that's the base of everything that we do. Sitting on top of that base is Web3. And Web3 for me is really important. It really signifies decentralization because it's based on chain. But most importantly, it provides ownership of that data to me as a user, not to a company. So today you might sign into Google, you would sign into Instagram, you might sign into Twitter. Each time you sign in, you're signing in with a different ID and a different password. And therefore, all that data is owned by the application. It's not owned by you. So now imagine Web3. In Web3, you use your digital identity and you sign into a DeFi app, a decentralized finance app, a game, a metaverse. You use that same identity to sign into everything. And therefore, that data and that digital identity is owned by you. You decide who to share that data with. You decide when to share it. You decide how much to share it. It's such a powerful concept.
Okay, but I am going to reel you back.
Okay.
First of all, you just answered like 5 of the questions that I had.
Okay.
Because I do know a little bit about this stuff, but in assuming that the audience is not made up of experts, first of all, when we spoke once before, you mentioned you were talking about how you define the blockchain, and I loved your example of your storage facilities.
Yep.
It's good to make a real life kind of Web 2 comparison or metaphor, really. So if you could talk about the storage and then talk about these things that layer on top of the blockchain, if you would, as other kinds of Web 2 examples taken to a digital level. Yeah.
So a digital ledger is obviously Web 1, Web 2. In fact, pre-Web 1, that digital ledger. The other way that I describe this is literally a chain of blocks. And each block has information in it, much like today, if you go to a storage unit and you see the different doors and, you have some goods in one, some good in a second, some goods in a third. They can be open with a key, but it requires a key, and it requires, 3 keys, for example, if you're going after 3 different blocks of information. And each of those are also run by a decentralized network. So it helps you to keep those separated. So the blockchain becomes then the backbone of Web3 because of that trusted and distributed data, because it solves common business problems between multiple parties, just like a storage shed might do as well.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to stop there. Because I do want to talk about, how this solves problems. But before we get to that, I think it's fair you had said something about if I sign into Twitter or I sign into Google or sign into something else, I'm using different passwords, etc. Well, let's just presume I use the same password. And I just want to make sure people don't think of it as, you need to have a separate password for everything that you're doing in a Web 2 world. And therefore, this solves the problem of having to remember your passwords. That's even a problem in Web 2, right? People use multiple passwords. And it's like, oh, I forget. I have to look it up. So what is it about? It's your identity. And you only need that identity. I get the part that some company doesn't own your data. When I type in, like with Amazon, let's say, if I buy a computer, then I'm going to wind up getting all these ads about things related to my computer. Or if I buy that black dress somewhere, I'm going to get things related to my black dress. And that's because these companies that collect a lot of your data have the right and ability to sell the data to advertisers. So there's this issue of it's your identity, you hold ownership to your own identity. And there's something missing for me in what that really means.
So when you sign into an application, you're a user. Let's say you sign into a Web 2 application, you're a user of that application. And because you want convenience of logging in and using that application for free, what you trade off is that data then doesn't get stored with your identity, with your username and password. It gets stored by the company.
Right.
In Web3, so this is now sitting on top of the blockchain is Web3. In Web3 now, that digital identity travels with you. So the data goes with you. It's one username and one password that unlocks multiple applications, but now you are the holder of that data. So for example, let's just assume that Twitter and Instagram were Web3, I could take all of that information that I had on Twitter, all my influence and everything. And I could go over to Instagram and I would be the same level of influencer on Instagram as I was from Twitter. But that's not the case because the application owns that data.
That's
In
not the
Web
case
3,
now.
not the case now, but in
Right.
Web3, because I own that data, I could take my influence with me if I wanted to. I may not want to, but if I want to, I could share that influence with the new app and then use that data in that particular way.
And so if I buy that black dress, the company that I bought it from is not going to have access to that stored data, that I'm a size whatever and anything
Right.
about my purchase. My purchase and all that information around that stays within my digital identity. That's what you're saying, yeah?
That's right. And so think about the implications of that for a retailer or a digital marketer. Now I'm not buying data from Facebook, assuming a fraud rate, and then going to you. I'm coming to you, Deborah, and I'm saying, Deborah, if you tell me that you just bought a new house, I may give you, instead of a 10% off coupon, because I already paid Facebook and I already assumed fraud, I may give you, instead of a 10% off coupon, I may give you $1,500 to give me that data. So now the reward system is for you, the user, not for a company or a government. It's directly for you. So now, this introduces a lot of things like how do you price that data? How do you decide how valuable it is, right? Maybe you would share data about your education. So maybe you're applying for a new job, and instead of you having to go to your school and getting a transcript and sending it in, now it sits with your digital identity and you can share and say, hey, look, I graduated from USC or wherever you graduated from. So it's super convenient and very powerful that you own your data. For example, Deborah, I just moved cities. I've been trying to get my healthcare data. About 50% of the people I called will not give me my data. They said they will transfer it to another healthcare provider, but they won't give it to me. It's my data. It's like my personal data, and I can't get access to it. And that to me is very frustrating. And it's one of the big problems I think that Web3 solves.
That is interesting. I've certainly experienced that. I'm also experiencing a lot of shadow right here because I'm in a place where the window is pretty bright and the sun's going down a little bit. So it's kind of weird. So how do you, I want to talk about the value of data because I understand that it makes sense. If I allow a retailer or a government to know these things about me, that has value, right? And Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and a lot of other platforms have already proven the data has a lot of value. I don't want to just talk about Facebook.
Right, that's right.
So how on earth are you more valuable than I because you have 63,000 followers and I have not nearly that many? So if you want to follow me, people, go ahead.
Well, I don't think it's that kind of data that would be valuable. I think it's data that people are going to find interesting about you. Maybe that you wear a size 8 shoe and a retailer is having a sale on size 8 shoes, or maybe a university knows that you're halfway to a master's and they could entice you to going back to school. I think it's that kind of data that will be the most powerful data, I believe, as we go forward in the future. And I think that that becomes now a very interesting disruption, not only to companies who've been selling the data, but think about, digital marketeers, sellers, et cetera, who use that data to target you as well. I think it's going to change a lot of different things that we do and the way that we do them, a lot of different functions as well. I think it's real exciting because I love change. Someone once said that growth and comfort can't sit in the same sentence because if you're uncomfortable, you're growing, right? And I think that's what Web3 will force us to do, is to change some of the things that we have previously taken for granted.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's, I think, a good philosophy too, right? All right, so let's talk about some examples. Let's go back into NFTs, okay? Digital representations proof of ownership, right? A digital representation of authenticity and ownership. Yeah. What are some examples? I mean, I've heard of plenty of them. I actually didn't buy one yet, but I'm thinking about it. You know, maybe a lot of people have heard of Bored Ape Yacht Club and CryptoPunks and all that. What are some other examples of NFTs? And I got to get this sun out of my eyeball.
Yeah.
It's not working for me right now.
Well, you know, let me give you a couple of examples of other NFTs. An unstoppable domain is an NFT. It stores, you know, data about you. It has your name in it. That is an NFT. I was just with Ashante at NFT NYC, you know, the musician who has a Grammy album. She is now storing her music as an NFT, which means that now more of the profits will go to her as she sells that off and has a smart contract that enables her to take portions of that money in different ways.
Hold on. Go back to smart contract. I'm sure that's not something everyone's familiar with.
Yeah. So a smart contract is built into a blockchain. And as you buy or sell a NFT, you have different elements of a contract. So just like, you know, if you sell a car, some people sell a car as is. Some people sell a car with a warranty. Some people, you know, sell a car with certain conditions or certain features on it. The same thing is true with a digital asset. You have a smart contract that exists and it states the rules of the game. Maybe it is when you buy the NFT, you own it completely. Maybe it is you own it, but anytime you resell it, part of the money goes back to the original owner. So there's all kinds of smart contracts that could exist out there. There is even a smart contract, you know, that took a great piece of art, divided it up, and did fractionalized ownership. So each of the smart contracts differs by, you know, just like you have in the real world, you have in the virtual world as well.
This stuff just blows my mind. All right, so you and I talked before about some other sort of famous NFTs, yeah, and who's making money on it, and I want to get into that, and also kind of why, like what you said before about having a smart contract so that there's rules associated with that ownership makes sense and absolutely solves a business problem of artists, and I think in my mind more specifically musicians who don't get royalties once they sell their work. And this solves that business problem for sure, right? Because as you said, if I sell it and there's a rule that says I have to give the original author a percentage, that has to happen. Yeah,
that's right. So, I mean, think about smart tickets, right? At NFT NYC, you get a ticket. And if depending upon how you write the contract, let's say I bought a ticket to the Super Bowl. When I scalp that ticket, if the smart contract says the original owner gets a part of that, or you can only raise the price by 10% and no more, that also solves another business problem of scalping tickets and people buying them up. There's so many business cases that the smart contract solves for sure.
That is interesting. And would you say a smart contract is an NFT, an aspect of NFTs, or is it actually an aspect of Web3 also, or is that synonymous really?
It's really a part of the digital ownership. It's really dictating what you own, right? It's the kind of the terms and conditions of what you own.
Okay. All right. So I'm sure most people some time ago, I don't remember when it was, but they heard about this artist who goes by Beeple, sold an NFT for $69 million, was it?
That's right.
That's kind of amazing. What are some other people maybe who aren't so famous and making so much money? What are some other examples of things that people are actually doing in the NFT world?
Yeah, and
can I just create something and put it out there as an NFT?
Yeah, I guess I want to go back on one thing on Beeple because it's something that I learned at one of the conferences I went to. There was a woman behind the proof of sovereignty for Beeple Cell. She happens to be an amazing African-American woman. Her name is Lady Phoenix, and she did the proof of sovereignty, not just for Beeple, but also for Gucci art sales and other NFTs. In fact, $995 million of NFTs that have been sold at Christie's were done with her help. And I wanted to call that out because we hear about Beeple, but we don't hear about the woman behind all of that work. So I did want to call that out. There are some other amazing collections that I see that are getting a lot of traction. So Nyla, she was 12, she's now 13. She became Time Magazine's first artist in residence, and she's doing quite well with her long neckies. We have this long neck view of women that are famous in the world, and she's done so great with that collection. There are also
sounds like Modigliani.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. And then Lazy Lions, who I love because the queens of Lazy Lions helped me to set up our Unstoppable Women of Web3. And again, that's art. And for them, their smart contract is when you buy it, you buy everything. So if I wanted to sell a tattoo of my Lazy Lion or make a decal and put it on a snowboard, I could do that too. I have complete ownership rights of that. And so
of that design. So you could reproduce it?
Of that particular Lazy Lion. Yep.
Okay. So you could reproduce that and then sell it off also?
Yep. I could put it on a t-shirt. I could sell it. It's mine. I don't have the rights to Lazy Lion, but I have the rights to that particular Lazy Lion.
Okay. And Lazy Lion, just to be clear, is a part of a collection that was, dare I use an NFT lingo, dropped.
Yeah. That's right.
Meaning released, essentially. Well, it's fascinating how I think something really important about all of this stuff is we're using a lot of different words in a lot of different contexts, right? We know what immutable is. We know what fungible means. We know what a token is, ledger, etc. And we know what it is to drop something, like, mic drop.
Yeah.
But when it's used in these terms, it just sounds kind of intimidating, because you don't know what people are talking about. And I would encourage everyone to not let, this is sort of the point of why I'm doing this. Don't let that stop you from learning about it and then deciding if it's something you're interested in, want to get involved in, want to work in, etc. Because if you were sitting in an operating room or standing in an operating room and somebody said, hand me the whatever, you're not going to know what that is, right? Now, if you go to med school, you'll learn what it is. If you hear a legal term like an easement, there's an easement on my property. If you don't know what that is, it's not scaring you in a Web 2 world, right? That's not frightening. You just know that it's a language that you haven't yet learned. And so I encourage everyone to just keep reading and keep learning, and not be sort of put off by the fact that there's a lot of lingo, just like in any other industry, if you will. So anyway,
I think that's a great point, and it's one of the things that I've been really touting, which is if we want the mainstream to adopt Web3, we need to stop making up our own words, our own terminology. And people say, think about the internet. Like when the internet came out, there was a whole set of words. Now people are really familiar with it, right?
Right.
So it's not unusual. But it is an interesting point that if you want something to go mainstream, if you use common words and easy to understand analogies, then more people can, quote unquote, get it.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm always talking about, would you, the people that I'm talking to, give a sort of Web 2 real life now example and just sort of bring that into a digital frame of reference. This is just amazing. All right. Okay, so let's talk about the hype, okay? Because I am not espousing an opinion about whether I think NFTs and Web3 and Metaverse are the greatest things since sliced bread, and I'm not at all saying this is all bunk. I'm agnostic here. If anybody wants to know, they can get in touch with me and I'll tell you what I think. But clearly, I think it was in January, there was the whole sort of NFT sales volume was like almost $17 billion. And then in 4 months, it dropped down to $11 billion. So it's like a 75% decline in 4 months. Can you talk a little bit about why that happened and what the implications are of that happening? Is it just hype, all this stuff?
Yeah, well, the overall economy is struggling right now, and so everything is tied together. And I would say that one of the use cases of blockchain is crypto. There are many uses of blockchain, but one of the use cases is crypto. And crypto, because it's not been tied to anything in many cases, like not tied to a stable coin, for example, or to the US dollar, has really fluctuated very, very rapidly. So I would say that there was a lot of hype. A lot of NFTs were really glitzy. And I think entering into a bear market, not just for Web3, but for the overall, look at, the major Web2 companies, how far down their stock has come. It's pretty incredible, right? Given everything that's happening with inflation. I think that, bear markets are great to weed everything out. What did, oh shoot, the great quote that was just used, Buffett just said it. He said, when you're swimming in the ocean, when the tide goes out, that's who you see. That's when you see who's swimming naked, right? Who doesn't really have a strong business model, who doesn't really have a good value proposition. That's not just true of Web3 companies, it's true of Web2 companies too.
Sure.
So I think that bear markets are great times to build. It's when all the great, think about it. It's when all the great Web2 companies really were created and grew up, right? They had time to innovate. They had time to build, why the market regrew. So I think the same thing will be true here as well. But just like in anything, I think there is hype. And I do think there are, we're just in the dial-up phase for Web3. So we're so early. There's a lot of experimentation going on. So, for me, I'm in it because I see a lot of value proposition. I see a lot of value for businesses. And I think, again, bear market's going to be great for building.
I happen to agree with you. When I started with a partner, a corporate training program, it was right after the .bomb, and the economy was not great. And everyone kept saying, why are you starting a business now? I'm like, now because we can get really cheap printing, and which we did a lot of back in those days. Yep. And cheap rent and cheap this, because the tide was definitely out, and it worked very much in our favor. Okay, so it's not hype. Let's talk about, or the hype isn't gonna stay, right? There's gonna be adoption. Right. Is it just educating people? Is it just conversations like this that is going to sort of create mass adoption? What's it going to take?
I think education is a really big part of it, but I also think, we're still early on. So you see a lot of technologies that are out there that are like an MVP. And so
minimum viable product.
Yeah, sorry, minimum viable product. So we need education, of course, but I think we also need to make sure that we're thinking about design and user interface, which hasn't really been thought about a lot in the Web3 metaverse world. In fact, the other day, I went in to do a lecture, or I guess a session, a webinar in the metaverse. So I had my avatar dressed up and everything, and I invited my friends. I was up on the stage, which was quite hard to get to because there was a stream and you had to get over the bridge or otherwise you'd fall in the water. So I made it up to the stage. Yeah, I made it up to the stage. And then one of my friends got stuck on the ceiling. Literally, his avatar was stuck on the ceiling. And he's pretty technical, And so it needs to be easier than that. It's got to be easier to get mass adoption. So I think education, user interface, and just plain, frankly, ease of use overall, as well as, cost and scaling mechanisms for the tech. If you think about blockchain, which I love the blockchain, it's very expensive today. And that's why a lot of people do a hybrid mode. We call it Web 2.5. They'll put some of the stuff on the blockchain because it's safe and secure, but it's expensive. So they also still use relational databases for some data. And again, all that will change over time, right? Over time, that will change.
Like anything else, I often liken it to a software update, right? I like what you said about, the user interface and all of that, because when you think about, the, oh my God, I'm forgetting the word for it. The music thing. What was it? The original one.
iPod.
The iPod. Yeah. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs did not invent the concept of storing music on a device. But besides, I'm not going to get into that whole discussion. Besides what he did technologically, the design of it and the ease of use absolutely made the thing explode. So I think there's a lot of truth to that. That makes sense. All right. There's so much more I want to talk about. When you spoke about being in the metaverse and you're doing a talk and the uncomfortable dress that you wore, you wouldn't wear that dress in real life. And what I'm interested in is this. Over the last, I don't know how many years, 5 years-ish, there's so much talk around be your authentic self, be vulnerable, show up, with authenticity and all of that stuff. How does that square with I'm in the metaverse wearing a pair of, 8-inch heels with no platform that I would never be able to walk in? How do you deal with that? What's the difference?
I mean, for me, it's kind of the difference between, dreaming and reality, right? I would never wear 7-inch heels because it would just be uncomfortable. But in the metaverse, I don't have to worry about comfort level. And I feel like I'm still myself because in real life, I still wear edgy things. I just don't wear 7-inch heels, which are uncomfortable. Another great example is we just built our headquarters in Decentraland, which is a metaverse. And we took a design from a woman architect, which is rare, by the way. And I loved her design. She actually designed it for a customer, but it wasn't able to be built. And why wasn't it able to be built? Because the way she had designed it, physically, it could not have been supported and been a safe structure. But in the metaverse, it was such a cool design. And I have the freedom to do whatever I want. So I took her design and I designed it in the metaverse. And it's really cool. Like, it's beautiful. You can walk around in it. Again, physically not possible in real life, but doable in the metaverse. And so for me, it's not, authenticity is, so is that an authentic design? Yeah, because I can build it in the metaverse versus I can't physically build it here, right? So I don't really think it has to do with that, but I do feel like the next generation, Deborah, this is something I worry about. With somebody saying my true authentic self is my avatar, because I can be who I want. I'm anonymous. I can be who I want versus I'm a little afraid to show who I am. Like, will people like me if I show who I really am? Where in the metaverse, they don't care. That is a concern to me. It really is.
So wait, hold on. I'm not sure I'm following you. I'm out here right now. People are watching us talk. They can see me. This is the real me. And if I were someone who was afraid to show my real self, you're saying I can be in the metaverse because the avatar is a representation of myself, and it is a representation that I create, my own data and my own shoe choices. Are you saying that I might, as someone who's inherently shy or introverted, which clearly I'm not, that I might basically not portray my real self in my avatar? Is that what you're saying? Did I misunderstand you?
You might. Yeah, you might. Or you might portray yourself differently. You might have more confidence in the metaverse because you're portraying different identity. I mean, even if you think about yourself on LinkedIn, think about your profile, if you would, on LinkedIn versus Facebook, right? On Facebook, you're probably posting, yeah, I went to the party, I went to the beach, I made this cookie, You can never do that on LinkedIn, right? On LinkedIn,
I never do that. Period.
A lot of people do. But on LinkedIn, you would post, oh, I just got promoted. I was on this
Right.
webcast, and so really both of those are elements of yourself. It's just different views, right? Different lens of yourself. And so I think the metaverse can be the same way, right? It's just like I told you, I went to speak in front of a college lecture hall and my avatar had jeans on, and then I went to speak with government officials and they showed me everybody was wearing, like little suits and ties. And I did that too. It was that I was looking to be appropriate. It wasn't that I wasn't looking to be myself. It was just what's appropriate in that occasion.
Sure, that makes sense. You're absolutely right in the sense of, just as we view dress today, and you go to a job interview, you don't wear shorts and sandals.
Yes. We hope you don't.
Or maybe
Some people do.
Or maybe you do in certain like Silicon Valley environments or something.
Yeah, that's right.
I want to go back to the NFTs. I just keep, following what you're saying, and it just takes me down these paths because I'm so interested. I've heard recently more and more that there are NFTs that I'll probably not use the right words, but come with a physical product. And I'm wondering, can you describe a couple of examples of those? And I'm curious how they're coming about or why they're coming about. My assumption is that since we're not ready for prime time yet in the NFT Web3 world, that it is sort of a bridge to get people who aren't willing to, let's say, invest or speculate in all this digital stuff. It sort of brings it home, kind of, and makes them feel more comfortable. What's happening with that? And do you think I'm right in what I'm suggesting?
I actually do think you're right. We're now seeing, Nike, for example, bought a Web3 company that produces digital tennis shoes in the metaverse. Super cool. They paid a lot of money for the company too, but the digital shoes are very, very cool. And now what they're doing is they're saying, oh, you designed that pair of shoes in the metaverse. Let's make that in real life, right? And so they're linking the two worlds together, kind of like that 2.5 again, right? Linking between the real world and the metaverse world. There are others that are doing that too. Like I said, for the Decentraland fashion show, I bought a pair of earrings. And then later the designer came back and said, only those who bought the earrings in the metaverse can get these in real life. And so it created for me like this scarcity, like only you should get them. You should get them. And this happened to be a pair that I would wear in real life. And so I bought them. I also bought a coat that I had designed in the metaverse. I got that coat made and I've worn it a couple of different places.
A real coat.
Yeah, a real blazer, like a blazer. And I've worn that. In fact, at NFT NYC, I wore a shirt that was designed in the metaverse for me. And they produced the shirt in real life. So you can see my avatar and you can see me in real life with the same shirt on.
That's interesting.
I like that because it gives me, I still buy physical goods and I still like digital goods. I like both. The next generation is not like that. They actually prefer digital goods. And there was a study that just came out. I wish I had written down who did the study, but they found that of the next generation coming up, they would actually prefer a digital good over an in real life good. So, for their birthday, they would prefer you to give them an NFT versus to buy them a real pair of earrings. That would be their preference. Yep. It's kind of interesting. And some of it has to do with sustainability, and, how long do you really keep a pair of earrings? This way you can keep them forever, not in a landfill. You're really being more climate aware. So some for that reason, and some they just don't like the clutter. Like they don't want the clutter. They don't have the space. So it's quite interesting. This next generation will be quite interesting, I think.
Yeah, but that brings up a whole nother set of theories about all of this, or issues to think about. One is, if first of all, I hope the next generation. Well, I shouldn't say I hope. I don't really care. But I'm thinking, are they going to all be running around naked because they're not going to buy real jeans and t-shirts? Because they will have to leave their houses at some point and enter a real life society. So what are they going to be wearing? Does what you just said connote, if you will, or predict that in the future people are going to be spending that much more time with, it might not be goggles, 5 years from now, but right now it's going to be, Quest 2 big goggles. Are people just going to be spending more time there? So that's where they'd rather spend their money on cool earrings and cool Nike sneakers. Is that what you're saying essentially? Or is that what you think the result is?
I don't know where we're going to head. I would say there are two sides for it. I think there's a hashtag tech for good side of the metaverse where, for example, when I was teaching that class in college and I was talking about some work we had done with the Mars rover, instead of just talking about it and showing a couple of slides, we just jumped to Mars. And so in the metaverse, I was able
Everyone had headsets?
Yeah. And we just bopped into Mars. We were in Mars. And so, the learning is more experiential. It was really powerful. Or think about, a friend of mine is a surgeon. And during COVID, they used to train all these doctors in Africa on a certain heart surgery. They couldn't go down there. And so they used the metaverse to do the training and to have people simulate. There is a lot of very good that's going to come out of the metaverse. But on the flip side, as there is with everything in life, there's a good side and sometimes a bad side. I don't want my kids spending 60% of their time in the metaverse. I want them like outside, like enjoying the sky and the sunshine. And so we're already seeing tons of jobs and roles pop up about, how to balance the metaverse in the real world. And, even think about gaming. Gaming was kind of the start of this metaverse. Think about your kids. If you have boys, getting them off of games, they're just so enthralled in it. And so I do think that like everything, there has to be a balance that exists.
Yeah. A lot of people are investing a lot of money and time in all of this. I read somewhere that by 2026, I think, 25% of the global population will spend at least 1 hour a day in the metaverse for work, shopping, education, social life. I mean, we're having an issue now with lack of access, for example, to broadband. I mean, some people don't even have access to the internet, which we learned, over COVID, especially. When kids had to try to do everything online and many kids couldn't. It is kind of amazing. Going back, we got a question from the audience about going back to blockchain and very curious about the fraud. You mentioned fraud. You spoke about it in reference to Facebook selling data and the amount of money, and they're sort of, what's the word I want? Including in the price this idea of some percent of fraud. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. So blockchains are, what we consider advanced or enhanced security. So with the blockchain creates an unalterable record of a transaction that has end-to-end encryption. So if you think back to that ledger, it says there was $100 minus 50 plus 10 minus 20, and that shuts out all fraud and unauthorized access. Additionally, that data that sits on the blockchain as well is stored across the network of computers. Remember that decentralization, which makes it, I'm going to say, nearly impossible, because there's always someone who can hack in, but nearly impossible to hack into, unlike a conventional computer where data sits together in a in a system. And then blockchain can access certain private concerns better than traditional computer systems with anonymous data.
What do you mean?
And So they can access data from anonymous sources to gather that data together versus a computer system that everything's stored together so you know precisely where it's coming from. So with blockchain, you have to have permission to access that.
Okay.
And so again, can it be hacked? I think anything in the world can be hacked, to be honest. But I think it's probably one of the most safe and secure ways to leverage and store data as well.
Got it. Okay. Another, back to an NFT specific question. So what are the benefits? Actually, I did want to get into something else first. You had mentioned previously about, using all this technology for good. There's an awful lot of people who talk about how much energy is being consumed in the process of making NFTs and selling them, even because when you resell them, because all that data is stored, and as you just said, all in one sort of bucket, so it takes even more computing power, which has an effect on climate change and carbon footprint and all of that. So that would be a sort of a negative, potentially negative impact of all of this stuff. What do you think about that?
It's a great point. And this is why, like for my company, Unstoppable Domains, we use what we call a layer 2, which is carbon neutral, which neutralizes all of the impacts or effects of data mining, et cetera. Everything we do is on Polygon, which is that layer 2. There are several other several other layer 2 choices too. But you are right. I mean, just like in the real world, you fly in an airplane. You've got issues there too, right? There are airlines like Virgin America, Virgin Atlantic that are trying to do things to offset, but you still have that same issue as well. So yes, there's always goods and bads, and you just have to make choices, and you have to look for companies who are making those right choices as well, right?
Yes. I defy anyone to say, here's a free ticket to Paris, but you got to fly on a plane. And I defy anyone to say, no, thanks.
That's right. Yeah, I would encourage, though, go look at Polygon. Polygon is one of our partners. They've taken great pride in their protection of the climate. If you go up on their website, you can see a lot of the stuff that they've been doing. And that's why we use them, is because of the protection of the climate and our environment.
Can you, without getting too technical, I'm just really curious because there's a lot out there about the energy consumption of minting NFTs, et cetera, et cetera. Without getting too technical, how do you keep it carbon neutral?
So what they
or if it's too technical of a question, just say, nah, skip it.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit technical, but essentially what happens, let me see how I can say this. They eliminate the carbon footprint by making it up in other ways or other areas. So essentially they reduce the transaction time, the transaction fee, and therefore the environmental cost as they do that. And so it reduces that high crypto energy consumption. Going into how they do that is a different story, but some of it is really about the amount of time it takes to get that done.
Got it. Okay. So what would you like people to take away from this conversation about NFTs, Web3, and we did certainly talk about metaverse, et cetera. What is your sort of, not advice, because clearly we're not in a situation here where we're doing any kind of financial analysis and recommendations. What do you think people can do to learn more about it and get involved?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Web3 and the metaverse will be disruptive. I think it is going to disrupt. It's just a question of when it will disrupt, and it's creating a lot of opportunity right now. And in fact, Deborah, one of the things I look at to spot trends is I look at where developers are going. 66% more developers came over to Web3. So you're going to get more innovation, more things going, because you've got so many more developers here. So what I would advise everybody to do is first to listen to more sessions like what you're having today. I just really applaud you for doing this to get them started and interested in it. That's one. But this is really not a space that you can just hear someone talk about and then you got it. Like in others, there are ways that you can listen and kind of it, but this is not one of them, right? Like you actually have to create an avatar. Like my friend said, I didn't realize how hard it was to move around. I created my avatar. Or, when we designed our headquarters, we put a door on it because what headquarters doesn't have a door? But opening the door as an avatar is very hard. So you learn things like that from actually doing it yourself, not just from hearing about it. So you need to do it, go set up a wallet, go get a domain, play around in the metaverse, create an avatar. It just helps you to get to know. And then the third thing that I would say is, make sure that you are joining the dialogue. It's the way that you learn, right? Like Deborah, you and you asked me a lot of questions. It helped me to learn and refine how I explain things, but it also helped you. And I think,
yeah, absolutely.
Dialogue and interacting is great. So, learn like this, learn through sessions like this, experience it. You've got to go get your hands dirty and then interact, ask questions. And the questions that you ask, everybody else is thinking. They just haven't asked it, right?
Exactly. I think a lot of people are afraid. Well, first of all, I'll ask about anything if I want to know about it. And I think a lot of people might feel like, oh, I don't want to appear, stupid. But God, this is also new. Nobody's stupid. I mean, people who are involved in it are still learning and everything is changing every day. Can I just ask you very quickly? We have only 4 minutes left, but I forgot to ask you about wallet, and wallet is a very important component of all of this. Will you please just define that and just talk a little bit about it?
A wallet?
Yeah, because people might not know what that is. You need one in order to create and or buy an NFT, correct?
Yeah. So typically, there are NFTs available through credit cards, but typically you would buy an NFT with crypto. And therefore, just like you have your dollar bill and it sits inside of your physical wallet, your crypto sits inside of a virtual wallet. And there are lots of choices out there. There are pros and cons of different types of wallets. Some are super friendly. Some are more for crypto natives. And you store your money in that wallet. So if you want to purchase an NFT, typically, again, there are more credit card options now, but typically you would use the wallet. You would connect that wallet to the purchase vehicle like an OpenSea, and then you would purchase from that. So a wallet is a very important element in the entire Web3 vernacular as well.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to spend a couple minutes on it. It's in my list of questions here, but we just went in a different direction. You purchase a wallet. You somehow purchase
you purchase
Sorry, you don't
purchase crypto, then you place it in the wallet. The wallets are free.
Right, I misspoke.
Yep.
You're purchasing crypto with real dollars, real yen, real euros, etc.
That's right.
You're getting if you can afford it, Bitcoin. Most people can't, so you're getting your piece of a Bitcoin, right? Putting it in your wallet. Then you go to, and you mentioned OpenSea. So for those that don't know, it is a platform where NFTs and other things, I guess, can be sold, right? So people create the art, put it up on the blockchain via a platform like OpenSea and Decentraland, right? And you could go to that place in the digital world, look at these NFTs, just like as if you're looking in a gallery, and say, I want to buy that, and you do it through crypto. So you open up your crypto wallet, your digital wallet, spend your cryptocurrency, get the digital art. It is exactly what we do. When I was in Soho a couple of years ago and found this incredible painting and gave the guy more money than I wanted to spend, walked home with my painting. So I get it's really, as we were saying before, it's just another iteration. It's another update, another way of doing things. I've got 1 minute left here, and I'm going to ask you a question. From your gut, when I say, what do you think when I say the future of work?
I think it's going to be the metaverse because, KPMG just announced that their customers and their employees will be working in the metaverse, doing meetings in the metaverse, holding everything in the metaverse. I think part of it will be that. And I think the experience will be better than a Zoom call. A Zoom call is still, not very personal. When you're in the metaverse, you can actually form friends. You can live and work and have fun together. So I do believe that will enhance our experience. In fact, Epic Games hosted a concert in the metaverse, and the satisfaction rating of the concert in the metaverse was actually higher than people going to a real concert.
That's amazing.
I do think that this will be the future of work. I think part of the future of work we'll all be, not all the time. I'm hoping not all the time, but
right.
It's, 1 day in the office, maybe it's, 2 days work from home, and then maybe it's 2 days in the metaverse, right? Versus just work from home versus office.
Okay, that makes some sense. That absolutely makes some sense. We are out of time. Sandy, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for sort of bringing it to a level that I think most people can really understand. And when I say most people, I'm talking about myself, because I really love learning about this, and I encourage everyone to keep doing the same. We're going to have to come back and talk to you like in 3 months or 4 months, because this stuff is changing so much. I think it'd be fascinating to hear what you have to say at that time. So I hope you'll be able to do that. And for all of you who are interested in another aspect of the future of work and future of technology and work, on the 27th of July, we're going to be talking with 2 experts about cryptocurrency specifically. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you feel like you've learned something, and come back next month. You'll learn some more. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Deborah. Thanks everybody for listening.